is the processes of socialization. We have discovered, well, we have read and we have learned through the last classes and through the book what socialization is. And if you remember, it's a process in which you adapt, you earn a certain level of skills to make sure that you can survive in different environments in society, or in other words, that you can live and you can interact with other social groups. We talked in the last classes, like for example, when we are a baby, we start developing the socialization process by learning how to speak, by learning how to walk, learning how to do many things, to copying our parents, to copying our older brothers and sisters and their behavior and the things that they do. However, we talk about as well the agents of socialization that are in some cases the family, school, many, many other things that we have discussed. But today we're going to talk about the processes that take place in the socialization process. So the first thing that we need to know is that how does desocialization prepare people for new learning? So the three concepts that we're going to learn right now is desocialization, resocialization, and we will see the other by now, but I won't try to spoil that. But at the end, we're going to see it because I want to focus on those two first. Desocialization and resocialization. We know that socialization is how you learn to interact with different environments, with different people, with different groups of people. But when we talk about desocialization, how they prepare it for learning. So how this process takes place for you to learn something. And we have a little example over here in the presentations, and we have mental hospitals, cults, and prisons are total institutions, places where residents are separated from the rest of society. And the residents are to manage their own lives, but are controlled or manipulated by charge. So the that I want to mention here is that in the case of mental hospitals, this is comprehensible because if somebody is in a mental hospital, it's because of their own sake, it's because of their own welfare, because you are there to learn some patterns, to learn some behaviors, to act in a different way that is going to help you function in society. But in the case of a cult, it's not that simple, because a cult is not something that you are forced to go like in a mental hospital, like if you are a harm or a hazard for yourself and for the people that surrounds you, they have the total right to take you there. But to a cult, that's not something that you go because you are obligated, but you go willingly because of that. And what's a cult? Well, a cult is basically a group of people that believe a certain thing, or they have different traditions and things that they do. You probably have seen it in movies, in TV shows, or in many things that you see that cult that they want to, like, for example, I have seen some movies that there are some cults that they have like a dark agenda in which they want to do something to destroy the world or something like that. It sounds science fiction, but cults in real life are like groups of people that they want to tell you how to live your life. They want to convince you, or they want to manipulate your brain to make you learn how to react or how to interact. There are many, many cults. For example, if you, I don't know if you have ever heard about the religion pantheism. And pantheism is a really, really interesting case of a cult. It has been classified as a cult and not a religion because pantheist people, basically, in a few words, they believe that everything is God. Okay? Everything, I mean everything. For example, I have some items here that I want to use as a matter of example to you. And I have this, and you can see on my camera right now, I have these chopsticks that for them, even though these are just chopsticks, the one that you use for Chinese food and you break it, you eat it, you like sushi or ramen or anything like that, then you can use these ones. But for them, this is God, okay? This is God. So that means that for them, this is God. This ruler that I have over here is God, and many other items that I can mention, and everything that exists, even if it is an inanimate object, is a God. That's a cult. That's something that they make you believe. That's something that they may force you to believe. That's why it's classified as a cult and not a religion, because a religion, you are free, like to choose in which things to participate or which things you consider real or you consider that are proper to you. But as I was telling you, they are total institutions. Places in which you have to follow the rules, or organizations in which you have to follow the rules, follow the different parameters that they have set, because the purpose is that you follow them and you adapt to them so you can be part of them. It's like, if you remember, when we talk about socialization, We talk like, for example, when we talk about peer pressure, like when you have a group of friends, of people, that in the case of that people, they try to make you act in a certain way to make sure that you belong to the group of friends. Like you may have some friends, like for example, let's put a little example, like there's a group of 7 friends, right? And you are one of them. And you see that all of your friends drink or they go to parties, etc. But you're not like that. But therefore, if they tell you, like if you are in a place, in a restaurant, and everybody eats and start asking for some beer, and you ask for a Coke, like the good boy or girl that you are, they're going to push you around to make sure that you drink a beer. Why? Because they tell you basically that if you don't do it, then you are not part of the pack. So you're not part of the group. You're not somebody that should belong there. And what basically is doing, or these kinds of institutions and groups are doing, is telling you that. Like in the case of a prison, it's really interesting because a prison is an obligation if you commit a crime. We all know that. But the prison is trying to form, supposedly, some behavior on people so they know how to, they need to work in society. You probably have heard, read, or watched on the news that people in certain prisons are mistreated. I remember that I was reading in some of the cases that there's a particular case in Germany of a prison that they don't mistreat you, but what they do is that they educate you on how to work in society, how to function as a normal human being and as a person that is beneficial to society than detrimental. In the case of a mental hospital, they try to change the way you behave, to change your think, to make sure that you can function in society as well. And in the case of the cults, because they want you to work in their own parameters, that is their own society and everything. So that's why it says over here that the end purpose of this control and manipulation is to permit the change in the residents, a change that it can be either negative or positive depending on the case. The purpose of a prison is to create a positive change of a person. So they say, I don't want to go back there because I want to be free and I want to have all the liberties that I have as a citizen. In the case of a mental hospital, they say, I came here because I need help, or I was taken here because I need help, and then I want to change that and be a better person. But the first step for this to happen, the place in which you start to forgetting the way in which you thought and starting the new path in which you start learning on the new things that will change your life, is desocialization. It's the process by which people give norms, values, attitudes, and behaviors. For those in total institutions, desocialization often means the deconstruction of the old self-concept or personal identity. In the case of the socialization and resocialization, I want to share something with you that is really applicable to this. I remember that one of my teachers at the university told me the following saying that is really applicable to this. You as a learner of any kind of art or any kind of science or thing that you want, or field of knowledge that you want to develop, you need to learn one key important thing. You need to learn, or well, you need to earn the capacity to learn, to unlearn, and to relearn, okay? To learn, to unlearn, and to relearn. Why to learn? Because we all try to learn something in a certain way. Like, for example, if you're studying for a test, what's the normal thing or the most common thing that we do? We make a questionnaire, we try to read, we try to memorize, but is that learning? Is that really learning? And that is something that we should know how to learn, what techniques to apply, what is more beneficial to you, what methods works better for you to learn something new. And also we need to unlearn, because there are certain patterns, behaviors, or different things or different concepts that probably are mistaken, and we should change them, okay? That we should change them. Like, for example, I remember when I was at school, we only were taught the 3 states of matter that were, as you know, then solid, liquid, and gas. That were the three states of matter, and there were no other state. But when I got to the university, I was taught that there was a 4th state of matter that probably you have heard about, that is plasma. That basically it's the condensation of gas into a high pressure so that it means heat. So it's like similar to the lasers that you will see in any sci-fi movie like Star Wars or Star Trek. But in this case, I was relearning, I was unlearning the old concept that there are just 3 states of matter, and relearning that there are 4 states of matter instead of 3. Therefore, that is a key concept over here, that in life you will learn certain things that you may think that are correct. I mean, in the case of patterns or behaviors or ways in which you develop in society, but then you will learn that they are not correct, and then you will have to relearn how to behave. That's what these people do in these institutions. Basically, desocialization is the process in which you start unlearning, okay? Unlearning the things that you know thus far. Like imagine it, like in the case, like imagine that you have a kid, like you're a parent and you have a kid, and you have always worked your whole life. Your mom, you and your wife, or you and your husband have always worked, and you have never had time to raise your children. So in this case, what's happened is that probably he's going to go to the streets and learn some behaviors, learn some patterns that are not proper and that are not good. And what will happen is that he will end either in, let's say, in a prison, saying something. And in that prison, he will learn that the attitudes or the behaviors that he learned at the street, they were not right. They had consequences. They were something that should be avoided at all times. Therefore, after they come out from that place, they go through the desocialization process. They forget about the things that they knew, and they come up new. That's basically the idea behind desocialization in simple words. But I'm going to talk about the other concept as well. That is, what does resocialization, or how does resocialization begin? Once the self-concept has been broken down. So if you remember, if you read the book, I know that you have, the self-concept is basically the idea that you have about yourself. It's how you see yourself, how the opinion that you have about your self-image has been broken down. So that means that it has been split apart. We all have a self-concept on, you can say, for example, if you think about yourself, you can say, I'm a shy person, I'm a person that is outgoing, I'm a person that is creative, I'm a person that loves art, that is intelligent, and many other things that we can mention. That's your self-concept. And it's broken down into pieces so you can reshape it and rearm it later on. But resocialization is a process in which people adopt new norms, new values, attitudes, and behaviors. And there is no better example for resocialization than the things that happen at church. I know that I always use church in my examples, but they are really a really great example of what happens on how to analyze society. Why? Because imagine the following. Imagine that you meet a person that was an addicted to alcohol, to drugs, or to smoke. And what happens? Then this person touches the bottom of the life, okay? So he discovers, or she discovers, that what he or she were doing was something wrong, was something that has carried out many problems, not only to them, but to the family or friends that surround them. So basically they have discovered, okay, alcohol is destroying my life, or, drugs are messing up everything for me. So I need to change. And they start discovering and saying, I need to change. What do? They go to church and they say, I know that if I go to church, if I look for the help of God and people that over there are going to comprehend me and understand me and help me out, I will come out on top of these situations and change completely in my behavior and my way of living. That's the hope, that God changes you. So in this case, that is the resocialization process, because you will see these people going to church, then be desocialized because they will learn that the things that they were doing or the things that they were believing they were true were completely incorrect in some aspects. And then they will start the resocialization process because they will learn how a person that follows God should behave, should dress, should speak, should communicate, should do many things. Therefore, they start learning all this process again. That's why I'm telling you, unlearn and relearn. Basically, resocialization is the process of relearning something, of learning it in a new way, of learning what was mistaken before and now changing it into something that is, the concept is supposed to be correct. Desocialization and resocialization occur as a child becomes a teenager, when a young adult begins a career, and as the elder enter into retirement or widowhood. So this is really interesting, because this is a process that we all have gone through, but probably we don't remember that much, or you probably have considered it, but you didn't know it was named like this, or it had these different characteristics. Why? Let's focus on the first, when a child becomes a teenager. When you are a child, what's the thing that matters the most to you? Probably to have friends, to play with toys, cartoons at that time because you're still a child. But for example, when I was that age, when I was a little kid, and telling you probably 6 or 7 years old, I remember that my only preoccupation at that time, you will laugh at me, but it's okay. It's part of the learning process in life. My only preoccupation at the time was to see if Goku could find the Dragon Balls. And I'm telling you, little Goku, when he was a kid, if he could find the Dragon Balls together with Bulma and all these, bunch of friends. And that made some silly. But when I was a kid, that was my preoccupation. I remember that my dad used to take me from school uh, back home, and we sat together watching that TV show and trying to guess what is going to happen today in the show. Is Goku going to find the last Dragon Ball? Is he going to defeat King Piccolo? And it may sound silly, but that was a preoccupation at the time. And now, as a teenager, it's something that I don't have anymore, that kind of preoccupation. Well, not as a teenager, as an adult. It's totally different, the kind of worries that I have compared to the ones that I had as a child. Because, as a child, one of our biggest preoccupation is that you lose your favorite toy, or probably that you get angry with your best friend and you don't know why, and many other things like those ones. But what happens is that when you get to a certain age and you start your teenage years, what happens? Some teenage stop watching cartoons because some, not everybody, but some, they stop watching cartoons because they don't believe in school anymore. They don't believe that is something that a teenage boy that is more mature and getting into adulthood should watch, because that's just for little kids, for babies to enjoy. Or they stop playing with the toys, and what they do is that they throw it away, they give it to the younger brother or whatever, they do whatever with them. But they won't go back and play with those toys. I'm talking to you probably with 12, between 14 years old, when this process is taking place. You won't do that anymore because you consider it silly, immature, something that if you keep on doing it, everybody's going to judge you and is going to laugh at you. It's going to be, a person that is going to treat you poorly. And suddenly that's why we take the decision to stop behaving as a kid and starting to learn how to behave as a teenager. Because if you remember, this is the generalized order, the concept that we learn what's socially appropriate in the environment or in the society. Therefore, that's what we need, or what we think we should behave like to survive in that environment. In that case, that's what's happening. Like, you see that other teenagers, they are not watching cartoons, they are not talking about cartoons, they are talking about the people that they like. They are talking about their crushes, their TikTok trends, or many things in those ones. And therefore that change occurs. Like, instead of childhood and caring about cartoons, caring about toys, caring about things like those ones, you start caring about other things. You start caring about your relationship, about your appearance, about your changes in puberty, about not being embarrassed, about not being perceived as a freak, because at that time that is what worries more teenagers in general. But that is the first change. The next one is when young adults begin careers. And let me tell you one thing. As you know, I have graduated from university like 2 years ago or more. 2 years ago and more, and I have worked in many places as a teacher and in many places as another thing. It doesn't matter what I work. The point is that what I'm trying to portray over here is that when you get your diploma, your title, your university title, you feel still like a teenager that is not ready to take on the world. Okay? At that age, and believe me, not because of just my personal experience, but many of my friends and now coworkers, or now colleagues, or people that are professionals in other fields, they don't feel like adults once they graduate from the university. They still feel like teenagers or young adults at most. Like, there are many things that they worry them, that they are dealing still with the same different ideals of things that they had when they were teenagers. Because even though the university is like a total institution, which they try to shape you for the future and adulthood and for the real world. There are some things that still feel like a school, or there are some aspects that still feel like if you are a young kid. But when you get out of there and you realize that you don't have to study anymore and you're not a student anymore, and now you are supposedly an expert on your field, you feel a change. And then you know that the personality that you had at the university is going to be different to your professional personality. I mean that the way you behave at the university, because the university will find people that had fun, that they act silly just to make others laugh, and that's okay. That's who they are. But they won't stop behaving like that when they start a new job because they want to appear professional. They want to appear that they are people that you can trust and people that are really, really suitable for a certain job. That's another change. And as well, another change that happens not only because of that, on how you will be perceived, because you know a job has rules, a job has different standards that you should accomplish. There is always time for fun. Don't get me wrong. And when you get to adulthood, you will see that you will have fun with your coworkers and people that surrounds you working. But there are some standards that you should keep. That means that you have less freedom and some characteristics and some different behaviors that you should adopt if you want to survive in that environment. When then we have another one that is when the elderly enter into retirement. And this is hard. This is hard because at the beginning, when you start working and you have certain years working, you say like, I hate working. I wish I were retired. But when you retire and you are a person that has to spend most of his days and years working, you will start feeling the burden like you're not doing anything. Like you are just wasting your time. Like you don't have time to be invested in something important. And so what happens is that many old people that enter into retirement, not everybody, I don't want to generalize, but many people who probably were really active in their younger years and really like to work and really like to go to the stress from 8 to 5 and doing the different actions that they did before, they find like they don't have that little something, that little sparkle that pushes them in life. And therefore they start feeling depressed and they start feeling down because they don't can do the same things. The other example is widowhood is obvious because if you get used to get married and live your life with the same person the whole time, and then that person is not there with you anymore all of a sudden, you will feel a change. And you will go through the desocialization process because you will have to unlearn what is to live like with the person that you love, either your husband or your wife, and to relearn how to live without him or her. And we'll move on to the next process. That is the last process I was explaining fast. So we do the trial. That is the anticipatory socialization. That means that in anticipatory socialization may occur in people who are moving from one stage of their life to another. Consider teenagers, for example, because they resemble to their own age, they willingly abandon many norms, values, behaviors that they learned previously. That's what I told you when they move on from childhood to teenhood, that they start abandoning all the things that they need because they see that teenagers behave in a different way. So anticipatory socialization is basically the process of you learning what's to come because people is telling you or you see in people. Like, for example, you see that your parents do not do the same things that you do as a teenager. And therefore you are anticipating yourself to that stage of life because you know how you are going to behave in that stage. This process generally begins in the preteen years. Preteens begins to observe the ways of teenagers, what I told you. This becomes their new reference group and the group that they are evaluate themselves and from which they are attitudes, values, and beliefs or norms. So basically, kids or preteens, they start seeing to young adults or to teenagers and they start saying, that person is so cool. I want to be just like him or just like her. Or probably girls may see another girl and they say, she's so beautiful. I wish I was so beautiful like her when I get to those years. Or a kid, you may say, that person is so cool in the way they behave. I want to be just like them. So that's anticipatory socialization. You see a person that is in another stage of life. You see, okay, that's the way I should behave when I get to that stage of life. Unconsciously. We don't say it willingly, but unconsciously we do. And therefore we start copying and observing and analyzing it and acquiring all those different behaviors and patterns on our own. And therefore we have a reference group. So that means that, okay, that people behave in a certain way because they are a certain age. Therefore, that is the way in which we are going to behave as well. And then you start adapting all the different norms and values that they have and making them your own. And that is the socialization process as a whole. It just includes these three parts that are desocialization, resocialization, and anticipatory socialization. In a summary, desocialization, to unlearn all patterns or all behaviors and ideas. Resocialization, to relearn new patterns, ideas, values, norms, or traditions. And the anticipatory socialization process is a process in which you see a group of reference and how they behave at a next stage of life than yours, and then you try to copy that. That's a summary of what we have learned today. And with that, we're going to finish this topic. And for next week, we will study social structure and society. I will stop recording right here. And from this moment on, we're going to go to T-Box and do the little trial, okay?